is going on? No horsing around, family. Wednesday live stream like we do every single Wednesday night, 9:15 Eastern time. I'm Zach Boyd, Stephen Burton, and we just thought, hey, we had to get, someone who was boots on the ground, James Boyd from The Athletic. James, it has been a whirlwind, and absolutely just crazy, crazy week. So we're excited to have you on here. Just your initial thoughts. We're going to go over all of it. We got a lot to unpack while we do this live stream, but let's just start here. Let's just start Monday. Frank Reich gets fired. Go, James Boyd.
Yeah, so we got the news like everyone else. There was rumblings of possibly, a change or something coming, but it happened as soon as I got off the plane. And actually, me, Zach Kiefer, and Stephen Holder, we were all on the same flight, so we're all getting off like, oh my gosh! I was actually getting in my car about to drive back from the airport when we got the news that Frank was fired. I don't think anyone was too surprised by that. Maybe the timing of it, but we had kind of seen the writing on the wall. It wasn't going well. He looked really dejected in that final press conference that he had. Looking back on it, it makes you wonder, like, man, did he know, like, this was it? But then a couple hours later, that's when it really got crazy with the Jeff Saturday hiring. And I know Twitter's got this thing going on with the verification badges, and you want to just check and double check and make sure that everything is like real, like this is actually happening. And so that was honestly crazy to me. I remember texting like our group chat that I have for work, and I was like, hey, like, I'm new to the beat, new to the NFL, but like, am I crazy to think like this guy has no coaching experience in the NFL or college? Am I crazy to think that he's in over his head, that this is actually happening? This is a good decision? And so, obviously all of us were writing, everyone at every outlet was writing, getting stuff out there. Everyone's reacting to it. Twitter's going crazy. And we got, word that there was going to be a press conference that night. And I think just from there, it even got more dramatic because it was like, at first it was supposed to be at 6, then it was 7:30.
Yeah.
Then it was 8. And then we got to 8 and the live stream was down. I got a bunch of people in my mentions who were telling me like, hey, this live stream's not working. And I'm like, I guess it's not, but you're not missing anything because it didn't really get started until like maybe 8:15, 8:20. Jim Irsay comes out there, Chris Ballard, and Jeff Saturday, and it's like, oh, this thing is actually real. This is really happening. And then, as you all saw, one of the most bizarre press conferences probably in NFL history took place. And afterward, we were left to write and figure it out. And I'll stop talking now, but it was just a wild 24 hours, I would say. And on top of that now, I guess, 72 or whatever it is. But just initially, I was thinking to myself, like, this is crazy. This is insane.
Yeah, there's no doubt about it. Hey, Big Con, what up? Addison, nice to have you back. Michael Brown, thanks for hopping in. As we're just getting going. Steven, man, I know we've had kind of alternate reactions as we went through the week. Just some initial thoughts on just the firing of Frank Reich before we kind of get into the transition of Jeff Saturday, press conference, all of that stuff, guys. We're going to cover it all. And then we'll get to your questions, Addison, Michael. We won't forget you. Just some initial thoughts, Stephen, when you heard the news, just gut feeling.
I mean, like James said, like I think everyone knew it was coming. We've talked about it on here ad nauseum that we felt like he wasn't. We all thought he was going to make it through the season just because Irsay had never fired someone in season ever. But we all kind of felt it. And then, I mean, I think me and you talked Sunday night, and I said, man, I think that might, the way they looked in New England, that might finally be it. Yeah. That might finally be Irsay's kind of the straw that broke his back. They look so bad against a team that everyone in Indy wants to beat, and they just looked inept. So I don't think it was a surprise, but at the same time, I'm sad a little. I say that just because he's such a good guy. Like, James, I know you've had way more interaction with him than any of us, but I got to have like one. And he's such a nice guy. You know that he's just, you felt bad still. And I don't know, but you knew it was going to happen. I think it was how quickly. I mean, I'm sitting in my office when it happened, and it came across, and I told my brother who I work with, and he was like, no, Really? Like, it was still surprising.
Yeah. I think that that's the feeling that we got in the locker room today. We talked to players for the first time since everything kind of happened, and all of the players were shocked with the decision. No, I say not all of them, but I would say the majority of them probably were shocked with the decision. I can't say all of them because I didn't talk to all of them, but most of the ones we talked to were pretty shocked by the decision to move on from Frank, and then also recognizing that change had to be made. They were still heartbroken over it. I mean, Quentin Nelson, who is not a media darling by any stretch of our imagination, was very candid about, how much he loved Frank Reich and how much he personally felt like he let him down. And that was a theme for a couple of players throughout the locker room. Paris Campbell was actually pretty candid about it. I have a piece on this coming out tomorrow morning, but it was a very somber locker room in a sense, but also a locker room that's trying to, stick its hands out and catch the walls to stop from free falling, because it feels like there's been so many changes. I talked to Alec Pierce, and this wasn't even just to gauge his thoughts on really everything that's happened as far as speaking for the team. I just wanted to get his thoughts just as a rookie. How are you handling, your rookie season when a month ago you caught a walk-off touchdown pass basically to win a game with Matt Ryan? He's no longer your quarterback. Your coach is no longer here. This is going to be, the third different offensive coordinator in 3 weeks. How are you handling all this? And he was just like, yeah, I'm really learning. This is the business side of the NFL. So it was definitely as crazy as it looked, I think, on the outside. It was as crazy as it was on the inside, because all these players pretty much were shocked as we were. And they didn't find out about Jeff Saturday before it broke in the media.
Yeah.
When it was reported, they found out like us. And so that's how quickly these things have kind of moved. And we could talk about the timeline more. Zach Kiefer, my colleague, wrote a great piece about that today, kind of detailing the 72-hour window of how it all came together. And it just lets you know this decision was really, really unprecedented in a sense. And also, the one quick thing I'll add in, and I'll let you guys get back to it, but Jim Irsay said in his press conference Monday night, he said, something like, and I'm paraphrasing, if Saturday turns us down, we're not having this. We're not here today. And I'm thinking, did you just say if he turns you down, Frank Reich's your coach still? That's, even if that's true, that's a terrible thing to say publicly. So I think a lot of people have a lot of respect for Frank. They understand that the change had to come in sports. The coach is always the first to go, but he's a great guy. Hey, I was on the beat for a couple of months, and he called me by my first name. Always class. He doesn't even curse. I'm I don't know anybody that doesn't curse. So he's going to heaven. But it was just a wild day for sure.
That's crazy. Yeah, it's just unbelievable. I think I told my wife I told my wife after it all kind of transpired, and we the news broke that Jeff Saturday was going to be our coach. I told her, I said, if you would have told me you could have 50 guesses to who the next interim coach is for $1 million, I said, we'd be broke right now. I said, there's no way in the absolute world that I would have ever been able to predict that Jeff Saturday, takes this interim job in kind of I don't know. There's so many layers to this, James. There really is. We started at this. When do those conversations go on? Because we know what the Colts have to say. We know what Jeff Saturday has to say. It is an impossibility that this transpires in the matter of 4, 5, 6, 7 hours in the middle of the night. These are conversations that would have had to have went on prior to. We'll never find that out, but I think we all know, just kind of reading the tea leaves as far as that goes. A question, and I think it's a good one that Addison has. Do you think this move of hiring Jeff Saturday hurts the image in the eyes of available head coach candidates, and free agents in this offseason? We'll go James first, and then Steven, you can piggyback off of that.
I think that it could. And I know everyone was up in arms, not everyone, but a lot of people were up in arms about the Rooney Rule, which does not take effect until the offseason. The rule basically states that minorities have to get a chance to get the job, legitimate chance, legitimate interviews, things like that. So I don't think that that is like the issue, is the fact that you skipped over more qualified people on your staff and even outside of your staff. I know folks are saying like, well, you can't hire anybody in season if they're on another team. It's like, well, Jim Caldwell, he's out there. He's not coaching. And so I, was fine with the answer Jim Irsay gave in regards to Rooney Rule. He's like, I hired Jim Caldwell. I had Tony Dungy. He doesn't need to prove his track record in that sense. Like, he's hired black coaches. They've been successful with the Colts. We all know that. So I followed up, and I was, man, press conferences are like, I feel like you got to be rude sometimes, just like yell, because it's hard to get the question in. So I finally get my question in, and I asked Jim Irsay straight up, like, you chose Jeff Saturday, but you had Bubba Ventrone on your team. You got Gus Bradley, you got John Fox with head coaching experience. Why was Jeff Saturday a better fit than these guys? And he tells me because he was a better fit. You just said it, because he's a better fit.
That was the greatest answer ever.
And he went on to say, like, one of the most quotable moments.
Yeah, and he said something like, you know it when you see it. He's got leadership. He's got toughness. And it's like, I'm sure that Frank Reich had leadership. I'm sure that he had toughness. I'm sure a lot of these guys have those traits. But, like, to me, it felt like he gave this job to Jeff Saturday because he is a trusted friend, someone who's respected in the franchise, a former great player. I get all those things. But to me, that response was pretty weak. It basically just sounded like the parent who tells the kid to go to bed and you ask why. He says, because I said so. And It's like, that's not a strong answer. So I do think that because of that, and because of the way Jim Irsay is operating, or the way it seems like he's operating, that could drive some people away from, like, applying or seriously feeling like they have a structure or things in place to do the job. Because right now it feels like Jim Irsay is just doing what he wants, and that's all fine and dandy. But at some point you're going to disagree, and it's like, am I even allowed to disagree with this guy? You know what I mean? So I think that could impact a lot of things. And as far as free agents go, if you would have told, Stephon Gilmore, Yannick Ngakoue, and a few others that this is kind of how the owner would act throughout the season, do they come here? So I think that you probably have your answer there. So I do think it's a hit on the franchise, but not something that's like, catastrophic. I think it just depends on how this plays out. And I do think that Jeff Saturday, unqualified in the coaching realm, is a very good guy, a leader of men. He got us pretty fired up in the press conference today. So I think that he's going to win over that aspect of it. It's just all the other things that go into being a head coach.
Steven, come on, man. What do you got for us?
As far as like head coaching candidates, like I sit and when you hear the name. And I'm sure, Jim, you've heard that it's Sean Payton is the name that you hear a lot. And people are like, oh, he'll never want to come here. So I sit on one side, which is Irsay does have this long history of being extremely patient with his coaches, right? He gave Pagano longer. He gave Grigson longer. He's given coaches longer leashes than sometimes anybody else would have thought. He's extremely impulsive now, which is it's almost out of character for him. And then I kind of lean on this side that, hey, money talks. Like Irsay is going to be willing to probably pay for a good coach. And when I say Sean Payton, I just always point to the fact Sean Payton went to the dumpster fire that was the Saints with Tom Benson, right? Like he did go somewhere. So, I mean, I'm not saying he's coming here, but money kind of talks. Same with a little bit with free agents. I agree so much, though. I think the name I've heard more than anything is Stephon Gilmore. Like that's I think who you feel really bad for, because he didn't sign up for this. Like he signed up thinking he was going to the Super Bowl.
Yeah, I spoke to him today. I asked him those very questions. I said, you came here thinking that Frank Reich was going to be your coach. You came here thinking that Matt Ryan was going to be your quarterback. Neither of those things are true now. How do you move forward with the same level of, investment in this? And he's just a true pro. He's like, you know what? We got to put it on film. Like his favorite word is film. Like that guy, you can ask him anything and he's going to be like, watch the film. I got to go see the film, put it on film. So I think him and pretty much anyone else, I think at this point where it seems like wins are really going to be very hard to come by if they haven't been already, you're playing for your right to continue being in the NFL. Like guys like Stephon Gilmore, Yannick Ngakoue, DeForest Buckner, like a lot of these big name guys, they don't have to worry about getting jobs elsewhere if things don't go right this season or whatever. Even though contracts they might come back for next season or whatever, trades, whatever, they'll have opportunities to play in the NFL. What I'm saying, but other guys, I think that the motivation now becomes a little bit more like, I'm playing to help this team, but I'm also playing to stay in this realm because a lot of guys aren't stars. You know what I'm saying? Like, you only get a few years at the highest level of football. So a lot of these guys are thinking like, okay, if this season goes south, which looks like it's headed that way, I want to make sure that I put on tape that I can play in the NFL and make sure that I'm showing my resume to anybody out there in the league who may need me going forward. So I think that's kind of like the mindset. He didn't say that, but I think just naturally that's something you have to kind of lean on. It's like, all right, if this goes crazy, like I got to make sure that I'm doing all that I can to prove that I belong in the NFL.
Yeah, I mean, there's no doubt about it. I mean, wow. Yeah, just so many things to transition into. I want to shout out guys as we get going. People are starting to pop in. Chad Miller, longtime friend, listener. Nero De Niro. Love the name, man. We've always loved the name that you have. Michael Brown's in here. Eric Gonzalez, Dabney, Corey Lampkins, Wyatt Law, if you're listening. Nomad, I'm sure Nomad will be around in a bit. Ayo will be around in a bit. Michael Brown says the Raiders aren't good. Jeff Saturday said the Raiders aren't good either. If we want to have some,
he will be a part of freezing cold takes if that does not work out this week.
Yeah, that's gonna be exposed. Absolutely. And guys, we're going to try to talk about all of it, get as much as we can pack in here. We got 3 people talking, try to give you guys your chance to be shout out. Wyatt, nice to see you commenting on here. If you want a really, really good in-depth listen, go listen to the 1% podcast. I would go over there and check that out. They did a really good job of just kind of phase by phase unpacking that as well. So if you just want to, on your morning ride to work or tonight if you're trying to fall asleep, pop that on, man. Check that out. I would say, Steven, that's in the top of the top quartile. I would say that's in the upper quartile.
I love it.
Top quartile of Colts podcasts to listen to.
I want to say that it's not blowing smoke. I have been listening to the 1% Better podcast for probably the better part of the last 3 years. Now, I do have to ask, your boy Zach tweeted out, are y'all actually changing the name? Is that happening?
Yeah, I truly think we are going to change the name. I have to get confirmation on that, but I'm pretty sure it's like a real thing. We're throwing around the word Saturday, trying to get some funds in there. We have to make sure it's not the name of anything else. But yeah, if you guys got any ideas, drop them in the comments. At me on Twitter, send me a DM, send me a message, send me an email if you're inclined to do so. But yeah, I think we are taking new names just because it feels like it should be called something else, right? I mean,
yeah,
it kind of run its course, and it was fun while it lasted, but obviously things have changed significantly in the last 3 weeks or so.
Yeah, man, I definitely think that's probably something. As we transition, let's get into that press conference a little bit. I'll kick that off. James, it was the weirdest damn thing I've ever seen in my entire life. If you've been a Colts fan for any time at all, those press conferences are usually led and controlled by Chris Ballard. This was the complete opposite. This was the Jim Irsay show. To be honest and to be fair to you guys on the beat, James, you didn't even really get very many chances to even talk to even Jeff about the new position because Jim had a narrative that he wanted to control, and he had a couple things he wanted to get off of his chest, and he took a chance, and did that. He took a stab at Andrew Luck. I think he took a little bit of a stab at that analytics type of situation with Frank. I don't know, man. It just got weird. But from your perspective, being right there in that group of Colts beat writers, you guys almost had to be looking around at each other like, what in the bleep is going on right now?
So the funniest thing about my first season so far is when I first came, everyone is saying, how things are going to be. You got Holder, you got Kiefer, you got Chap, who's been there since they moved here in '84, covering the team. And they're all saying like, hey, James, this is how it goes. I'll take you on around my wing, let you know the ropes. And we're now at the point, I said this today, I laughed at all of them just jokingly. I said, like all of you are rookies now because this is all our first time going through something like this where, it's kind of going off the rails. And I think that the reaction that we had really mirrored the rest of the NFL, where it's like shock and confusion just at some of the answers, some of the justification behind making the moves that he did. You had CIA references. You had Michael Jordan being, he compared Chris Ballard to Michael Jordan and the missed shots. And, he was saying the sausage comment, don't know what's in sausage, but I know what makes a good football team. And he kept saying, I haven't hired a losing head coach. And I put it out today, actually, because I had to put out like 5 predictions for the rest of the season, which this was an assignment I was assigned like before all this happened. And I just kind of put it off. I was like, I'll write it early next week. And I was like, wait a second. This is actually a lot more fun now because things have like changed significantly. So here's my predictions. And 4 out of 5 were bad. I'm sorry, just because of how the season is going. But I mean, you look at some of the things that he's saying and the way he's trying to defend it, and you're like, this does not sound like a real franchise at the moment. Like, I mean, quite frankly, it was reported that like people are like laughing at this team, like others around the league. And I get that. Again, I'm not rooting against Jeff Saturday. I think that he's a great guy. Hell, if he does a great job, it'll make for a great story, which is always what I'm rooting for. But it just seems like how quickly everything came together. It just seems like Jim Irsay was ready to pick a battle and kind of die on some hills that, looking back, may be some really bad ones to die on, just because, I don't know, man, it feels like this is unprecedented, because it is. I mean, oh my gosh, this is the first time a coach has taken over an NFL team with no college or NFL experience since like 1960 or something like that. So we'll see. I mean, it's the gamble of all gambles. I just don't think either way, no matter who is the coach, quite frankly, the season is going to be turned around. It's just the optics of it do not look good. But we'll see. I do think that Chris Ballard, I'll ask you all this and you all can chime in, but like when they talked about like the coaching decision, Chris Ballard said that it was a spirited like conversation. He did not say like, I was gung ho, I was fully in. He's like, we had a spirited conversation and came to an agreement, which we all know, like, if the team owner says this, that's what it's gonna be. Yeah. So I don't know if he was like, 100% on board with it. I'm sure he is now, because you have to be, but that was something I picked up on. Like, man, like, I can't imagine that Chris Ballard was like, hey, just call Jeff Saturday. Like, yeah. And even then, like Jeff Saturday said today, Jim Irsay called him during Sunday's game to complain about the offensive line. I got that clarified. Because I know people tweeted that out. Like, I was like, let me just ask him, be fair. Like, this was not like to ask for the job before like Frank was even done. And he's like, no, like that was just, he was ranting about the offensive line. But I have to think like in the hour since then, he probably was like ruminating, like, you know what? Let me call him back. And so it just seems like something that no matter how you look at it, whether you thought about it for a long time, it's not fair to the coach that you had. And then if you thought about it just in a quick decision, it's not fair to the coach you had because you did it so quickly. So it doesn't look good either way, just with Jeff Saturday in particular. But I mean, hey, at this point, all things are on the table.
Absolutely. Steven, you chime in and then I'll kind of round that one up.
Yeah. So I said something. I said that looking at, because I'm one of those people, I'm watching the stream. I'm waiting for it to come up, and watching it, it was so weird because Ballard looked like he didn't want to be there. He looked genuinely pissed the entire time. Irsay was confusing. And the one who was supposed to probably, who everyone expected to not be like set and ready, was Saturday, who came out looking pretty decent with what his answers were. But it was such an odd. I caught what you were saying too with the spirited debate. That I think the consensus from all of us was that I think Bubba was probably Ballard's guy, is the way that it felt from the outside. You may know more. I mean, you know way more than me anyway, but it definitely didn't feel like it was Saturday. It's the word that comes to mind, and it's going to be an interesting one. It is the most neutered that I've seen Ballard in any kind of setting like that. Like you said, Zach, he runs the conferences. He runs. I felt for you guys too, because I felt like you said, Irsay had his agenda on what he wanted to get across, And I think that's what made it such a weird press conference to watch too, is that he fielded the majority. He either fielded or tried to take over the majority of the questions.
We had to ask him. I mean, it felt like, okay, yes, this is Jeff Saturday's introductory press conference, but at the same time, it also felt like, man, we don't know if we're going to get Jim Irsay again in front of us or Chris Ballard, and Jim Irsay really especially because he's the one kind of driving the decisions. I don't think I really went into that press conference thinking like a Jeff Saturday question was high on my priority list, quite frankly. And I felt bad in that sense because you do want to give him that time. And we kind of made up for it today because it was just Jeff Saturday. But a lot of us were thinking, no, we have to ask the tough questions. And one of the things Jim said was like, you got to, hey, are you guys held accountable? And you got to get clicks and you got to get this. And I'm like, no. I understand. I do think that, and I'll say this just for true transparency's sake, there are times when we might write a headline and put a teaser in there that makes you want to click on it or something like that. Anything with numbers always gets clicks. So I would say like 3 reasons why, 5 this, 10 this. People just like lists. Stuff like that works. It gets clicks. It gets traffic. But when you make a coaching change like that and then hire Jeff Saturday, who again, I'm not, nothing against, but when you make that unprecedented of a move, it's going to get clicks anyway. So I was just like, hey, it's not us. Like, I mean, you gave us this, I guess, this opportunity to get more traffic, get more clicks, get more headlines. So I felt like he was on the defense a lot. And he's going to feel like that probably until it pays off or it crashes and burns. And we'll see. One thing, I like about Jeff is that he was like, I am who I am. I think this authenticity will go over well with the team. I don't think he's pretending to be anybody he's not. And he's got nothing to lose. He's the one guy thinking all of this where he's really got nothing to lose. Like if it doesn't work out and you go back to, being on ESPN, you got a crazy story to tell. If it does work out, you got a crazy story to tell. So I think that he's in a position where he's just trying to do the best that he can and give himself a legitimate chance to be considered in the offseason, which I think will come either way. Like I think that he could legitimately go 0-8 and Irsay would still consider him for the position when they open it back up because of the Rooney Rule and go through the entire process. I think that he's respected that much in this building and among this franchise.
Yeah, I mean, no doubt about it. I'll say this, I've been a fan of the Colts for a very long time, and I've been a Colts nerd, passionate about. I've watched so much football in my lifetime, and I almost felt a little bit. This was a man in Jim Irsay, in my opinion, that was hurting a little bit. He was upset, and so many people have been critical of Jim Irsay for not listening to them over the last year and a half. If you don't think he was listening to you, you didn't listen to that press conference. That pain that came out from him, it represented the pain that he felt from this fan base, and from so many other people that matter to him inside and outside that building. And one thing I'll say, right or wrong, Jim Irsay wants to win at football. And we're fortunate to have that. From this standpoint, there's so many owners across the league that, if you really want to go not too far in the same city, if you want to go over there to Gamebridge and you want to look at their owner, it's a little bit more about the dollar line. How's that? What are the profits this year? Not as much about winning necessarily. And I think Jim was hurting. Jim had a lot to say. I think had he been in a position where he could have been in a controlled setting where he wasn't getting people firing shots at him, questions at him left and right, he could have articulated that much better than he did. At the end of the day, he just wants to win football, and he's disgusted that we didn't. I think he really, really felt coming into this year. I think if no one's more hurt than Jim Irsay, because I think he felt like he had a Super Bowl contending team. James, what do you got on that? I saw you.
Yeah, so to that point, and I made this point earlier when I was on the radio, he hasn't succeeded in any of his plans throughout this season just before any of the changes. He wanted to win the season opener. That didn't happen. You want to go down to Jacksonville, avenge what happened last year. That did not happen. It was complete opposite, actually. You got embarrassed. You want to beat Tennessee. That doesn't happen. So at what point do you get so frustrated where it's just like, I'm going to do what I want to do because listening to you all isn't working out? So I understand that aspect of it. And I do think that he was been let down just considerably this season. But at the same time, I think that there's also just this sway between maybe quick decisions and then having a moment to step back and be like, okay, maybe that wasn't the best decision. For example, Matt Ryan. I understand he did not play good. I don't think anyone could say he played good.
Right.
But in the 3 wins that they have, he led 3 game-winning drives. I cannot say with just fairness that Sam Ehlinger is a better quarterback than Matt Ryan if you're trying to win football games. If you're working for your future, I kind of understand that you want to see what you have before you look elsewhere. But if you're talking about right now today, I do not think that Sam Ehlinger is a better quarterback than Matt Ryan. You also have a Super Bowl MVP on your roster who you haven't, given a chance to play. And then, 2 weeks ago, it was Sam Ehlinger's job. It's his job. He's the guy. And then it comes out, yesterday, my colleague Bob Kravitz gets a call from Jim Irsay, and he's saying, hey, actually, we're going to use all 3 quarterbacks if it's necessary. So it just seems like, when things happen and then the dust settles and people start to critique it, maybe, he has like that moment of clarity where he can kind of look beyond just the moment and the emotion and realize, okay, maybe this isn't the best decision, or maybe I should have gone a different route. I'm not even saying like being an owner or a coach is easy. It's probably extremely hard. Like that's one thing I will, accept fully, but it just seems like there's been a lot of decisions that have been made because of the frustration, like you said, of not being able to succeed, even like the small stuff. Like, if they win in Jacksonville, if they win at Houston, how different is this season? If they split the one against Tennessee, the 2 games, how different is this season? And so I think that, again, when you fall short time and time again, you start to lean more into maybe that anger or just some of the things that are going on. So we'll see how the team can rally. It's crazy as it sounds. They're not like completely out of it, which is a testament, I guess, to the the division they're in. But I mean, at some point, I think if they get a 4th straight loss against the Raiders, who I actually think they have a chance to beat, if that happens, then I don't know. We'll see. But I just think that realistically, I think that they have 3 possible wins left. The Raiders, Pittsburgh, and Texans in week 18. But beyond that, if they're able to, like, by some miracle, actually, like, I think he said 9-7-1 gets you in, is what he told Bob Kravitz. If they finish the season 9-7-1, you build that Jeff Saturday statue out there right in front of Peyton Manning, and you have him hiking the ball to him, okay? Because that would be insane. Like, I feel like we would get 30 for 30 on that. Seriously.
Nothing short of a miracle if that happens. Guys, real quick before we hop in here, if you haven't had a chance to like, rate, review, subscribe, we're asking you to join our family. We just hit 2,000 subscribers, so super big thank you to all of you. Also, we're offering memberships right now. You guys can join with a $4.99, $2.99, $1.99. Help Steven and I kind of keep the lights on, keep things going. And as always, we appreciate your comments. If you have a specific comment that you want us to pop up there and ask James, hit us with one of those memberships and we'll throw it up there and we'll get James to answer it before we hop off here as well. Back into this, and I want to kind of tie a bow on this Jeff Saturday. And I'm interested first with you, Steven, and then we'll go to James. At the very end of the day, next year, week 1, Jeff Saturday is what for the Indianapolis Colts?
Ooh, man, it's
Lights
so
up.
open-ended.
Yeah.
And you got to go to me first? Okay, so
That's a good question.
So I was going to say this. First, I was going to say, I wanted to say one thing about him being hired too that I think was interesting is I truly believe, I was thinking about this as you guys were saying, I truly believe that Jim Irsay thought this was going to be a home run with the fans and the media, like bringing back Jeff Saturday. He thought it was going to courtesy favor. I really think he thought that, and I think he was very surprised that it wasn't.
That's probably fair.
So I heard that on the radio. I think it may have been Kevin Bowen this morning when he was talking about it. But I think that. So okay. So your question about is he? I'm gonna. Oh man.
Come on now.
What is he week 1? A part of the Colts organization.
He's gonna be what?
You like that? So okay. So I think so much is contingent. I think James is right too. I 3 wins. If they win more, that's amazing. If they win 4 or 5, it's astounding. And I think he's legitimately a candidate. I think I think Irsay is going to give him every opportunity to have the first crack at this job. I think he wants him in the building. He's very openly talked about they've been trying to get him in the building in some way, shape, or form. I think I'm really interested to see what he does too, though, just simply because I think he only answers to Irsay. I think he answers to Irsay, so it's going to be interesting to see what he does lineup-wise. What changes does he make? I don't think he's not beholden to, well, this guy's making $10 million a year. I need to start him. If he's going to sit him, I think he's going to sit him. Man, I think I was talking to my buddy today, and we were talking about it and saying, if let's say they win the 3 games that we all think that they could win, and they're competitive in the other ones, like you lose, but you're competitive. Man, I could see it. I could see him being head coach in 2023 if that's the case. If he wants it. If he doesn't play well, then I think he transitions to some sort of front office position. I think he's involved some way. He's in the building now. That's what he's been trying to do. He's not going to let him leave the building.
Yeah. Hey, we'll go to James next. Hey, Nomad, thanks for the sticker, my friend. Thanks for hopping in and doing that for us. James, at the week 1 of next season, Coach Jeff Saturday is what?
I'm going to say he is a team consultant again.
Okay.
I'm going to go the conservative route. And that's not saying that he's not going to have a chance to, be involved with the franchise. I just think that this is you're hitting the ground running and you're kind of jumping on a roller coaster as it's passing you by. And I do think that it's not going to go very well, quite frankly. And I think that they're going to reset and possibly most likely go to a different head coach, one with more experience, and give a chance for Jeff to kind of really get invested in this, probably be a full-time consultant or something around the building where maybe, like you said, he's involved with the front office. I mean, maybe he is a coach and he's like the offensive line coach, for example. I just don't know if he'll be, the head coach, because I think that's a really big task, quite frankly. I think that he'll get a crash course. Obviously, over these last 8 games, I got nothing against him. I just think that, if you want to attract free agents, if you want to, if you're going to draft maybe a really high quarterback or something, you probably want someone who's, been a coach before or has some track record with, some success in the NFL at that level before you make that jump. So nothing is Jeff Saturday at all. And again, I will eat all my crow if I'm wrong, and he's a great coach and he's got all the intangible stuff I think that you need to be a great coach. It's just the X's and O's and the logistics and stuff like that. Like, I'm not doubting his football knowledge. I'm just saying when you go from owning your position group to being in charge of hundreds of people, I think that's a very big thing to kind of jump into feet first without having, some of that experience, because experience is your best teacher, whether that's writing, podcasting, you all know, you probably weren't as good at this now as you were when you first started. So for me, I just think that he'll be involved with this franchise some way, but if I had to pick, it would be like a team consultant, but just more hands-on. Like, I don't think it would be one of those things where he's, just calling in or watching tape. I think he will be in the building, like Steven said, because this guy loves football. And that's the one thing he said today was like, I've loved, talking to you all, and kind of staking my claim and defending the hire and stuff like that. But he's like, I just want to get out there and touch some grass and be on the field. And I think that gives him and the team a sense of comfort where you can kind of go back to your happy place in a sense and go back to your roots and do what you can do, which is play football. So we'll see. Again, does he know how to coach at this level? No, because he hasn't done it, but he does know football, and we'll see how that translates. And just the drama in me kind of wants to see what happens with this Josh McDaniels matchup as well. I'm like, what are the odds that this would all happen before you go face the coach that turns you down, and then he's not having a great season either. And so I just think that, things could get very interesting, one way or the other, win or loss over in Vegas. If things go a certain way, like on one hand, if the Colts win, It's great for Jeff Saturday. On the other hand, that would be terrible for Josh McDaniels. But on the flip side, if Josh McDaniels wins and Jeff Saturday loses, it's like, all right, does this free fall start now? So I'm very interested, man. I think that the names, the headlines, we were talking today, like, this is how crazy the season has been. Like, we had Stephon Gilmore going back to New England. We didn't even do a story on that. We got Yannick Ngakoue going back to Las Vegas. We're probably not going to do a story on that because there's so many things that have happened and that have kind of gone crazy that it feels like, it will be a waste of, energy to write these stories without getting some of the big stuff, some of the reactions, some of the other things. Like, we haven't talked about the offensive coordinator now or the new play caller, which is Parks Frazier, 30-year-old, never called plays before in the NFL. So there's so many moving parts that I find interesting. And if nothing else, I think Colts fans and us as the beat writers and anybody else who's consuming the sport has at least a slight interest in what happens in Indy.
Yeah, no doubt about it. We will definitely, that's going to be the next transition into Parks Frazier. I'm not going to skirt around this. Now, I'm going to say this, and the reason I popped this up by Nomad, week 1 next season, Jeff will still be loved by Colts fans and players. That's kind of where I'm at, and I'm going to explain why. I want to say general manager of this football team, but the optics of that, I don't know how that looks for a franchise. So, I'm going to kind of walk through this. Jim Irsay, we all know that he hired Jeff Saturday, and there had been conversations about that. To think about, hey, I've already promised you to be a coach, where I've already promised you to be a general manager. All of this is just kind of a vicious cycle. And I don't think that's going to happen. I think Jeff cares enough about this franchise, Jim Irsay, the game in general. If he doesn't do a good job, I think he says, you know what, Jim, I liked what I did at ESPN. It was a good gig. I'm always going to be around if you need me. I'm part of this family for life. And I just don't think I don't know that he ends up having any place other than just maybe like a small consultant role. I want to say general manager. Like, I think that Jim Irsay loves him that much. Like, he values him that much. I just don't know. I just don't know he gets enough out of this little 8-game stretch for that to happen. Anyways, I digress.
We'll see. I'll add this. Jim Irsay did say that, basically Chris Ballard would be back next season. And he kind of took a shot at us and was basically saying, the media, you all with your criticisms is basically kind of like unmerited, has no substance. He said your words have no substance, like the facts are the facts. But he does deserve some criticism for the way this team has been constructed. Most significantly, obviously the offensive line. You paid a bunch of guys who aren't playing up to that level. You banked on a left tackle and Matt Pryor, who hasn't been good. You banked on other positions or on the offensive line and certain guys to just step up, and they didn't. So there is some criticism there. I thought it was interesting that he pushed back in that way. He was like, you guys are kicking the, stuff out of me and for drafting a wide receiver. And it kind of felt like he was making an excuse, so to speak. It's like, we don't drive these decisions. Like, we give our opinion, but you can't make your decisions based off what you hear on Twitter or what you hear in the media. You have to do it because that's your job to build this team. So all that being said, I think that he's safe for now. Like, Jim Irsay told the national media, a couple of national reporters a couple weeks ago that, Frank Reich was safe. What does that mean now? You know what I mean? So I do think that there's a possibility that there could be a GM change. I don't think it'll be Jeff Saturday. I think that Jim Irsay would have enough foresight to know, like, if coaching is something that's very, very difficult, then GMing is probably even harder just because of, how to put a team together. I think is very, very difficult when you're given that actual job. Like, and it's not some game where you can, hit rewind or hit reset. Like, it's dollars and cents and moving guys around and stuff like that. So I do think that we could see that type of change. But again, a lot of this depends on how the season goes. If Jeff Saturday is phenomenal, then hey, maybe he helps Chris keep his job. But if things go super south, I wouldn't expect that anything is set in stone today, for years and years and years to come.
Yeah, it'll be interesting.
Say,
man.
Zach, I wanted to point something out that keeps popping up in the chat is the precedent of Jeff Saturday and having no experience.
Yeah.
So a name that I've heard that they keep bringing that people have, and I think it's mistaken, is they bring up Mike Vrabel. Mike Vrabel had experience. He was a DC in the Texans. He worked at Ohio State on the defensive staff. But a lot of the precedent that we see is not in this sport. You know, the names that are in the chat are like, you know, Steve Nash. Steve Nash just got fired. Right?
Yeah, and,
you know, or
they'll
Jason
say,
Kidd.
Steve Kerr, Larry Bird, obviously, and these are all, you know, pretty good examples outside of Steve Nash.
Well, and even Steve Kerr was a GM. Like he was an executive.
Yeah.
He had kind of feel for it. Kent Sterling kept bringing up the name Mike Matheny for the Cardinals, but the precedent is not in this sport. Like that's, I think that's the thing.
Yeah, please say that, you know, 2 times and louder for those in the back. And then no disrespect, I don't mean to be like, you know, like I'm some know-it-all, but having covered both leagues and seeing it up close to personal, even just myself, learning both sports on a deeper level, having to cover so many games, football is more complicated than basketball. There's no doubt in my mind about that because it isn't as fluid. Like in basketball, quite honestly, if you have 3 great players, you probably have one of the top teams in the NBA.
Yeah.
In the NFL, if you have 3 great players, that means nothing if the other, like, you know, 8 are not good or different units of your team. Like you can have a great long snapper, and a great, you know, and a great wide receiver, and, you know, a great left tackle, and that means nothing if you don't have a quarterback. So I mean, I do think that it is harder to step in and be a coach without any experience. But like I said, I'll put it like this: if you're gonna choose a coach that doesn't have any coaching experience, you choose one like Jeff Saturday, who today defiantly told us, like, hey, you know, don't forget, I did this sport for 14 years. I'm saying this for him. I was pretty good at it. You know, I was a 6-time Pro Bowler, and he said it himself. He's like, you know, I played with 5, you know, Hall of Famers. I know what greatness looks like. He's in the Ring of Honor here. So I do think there's some merit to that. And I think that if anything, these guys should want to succeed for a guy who gave so much to this franchise, and his resume player-wise is something to respect. And I think that can speak to players. Like if I'm a player and I look at this dude, like, yeah, okay, he might have been a coach, but he was a damn good player. And so if he was, I mean, that should be enough to motivate you to learn from him. And if anything, I've seen this in the chat as well, if this dude fixes the offensive line by some miracle, again, build a statue tomorrow. Like seriously, because I mean, I've kind of come to the terms or the idea that they're not going to be a very good offensive line no matter what you do. But if he can just make them passable and make them respectable and just average, that in of itself, I think, is enough to warrant, okay, maybe you do look at him as a long-term candidate for this job. So there's a lot of moving parts, a lot of exciting things going on. But I just think the last few days, man, like there's been so many times where I've closed my laptop and I'm like, wow, that actually happened. Like, wow, this is a real thing. Like, it's not on ESPN anymore. And he's here in front of me. Like, and so that's been pretty wild. And it was cool today even to talk to some of the players about how, you know, they grew up watching this guy. And now he's their coach.
Yeah. Guys, let's talk about Parks Frazier for just a second. 30 years old, same thing as your interim head coach. Absolutely, really no experience, right? Like at any high level for sure. Certainly hasn't called plays in the NFL. Steven, you go first. Just your thoughts on Parks Frazier. I mean, it's hard to have a thought on someone who really doesn't have any background, but just your thoughts on that.
So I don't hate it as much as I think a lot of people might. He's the closest to Reich, you know, as far as continuity. He knows Reich's playbook. They're not changing. I mean, Saturday even said today, he's like, I tweaked some of the practice stuff, but I'm not making wholesale. You can't do it.
No.
So he's not changing the playbook. Parks knows the playbook. He did help in the game planning. You know, there's the trend of the young guy. I'm not saying he's going to be this great person, or this great coordinator. He worked really closely with Ellinger since he's been drafted. I don't hate it. I do have a question for James though, because your person, one of your colleagues, I'm trying to remember if it was Kravitz or if it was Chappell, said that supposedly did they offer? Do you know? Did he offer it to Milanovic and he said no?
To my knowledge, I don't know anything about that. I'd have to read. I don't think that happened. And if it did, I can't report that. I can't verify it. I have no idea if that's.
I don't mean to pin you in, man.
No, you're fine. Like, and I hate to sound like a politician, but I truly just don't know. Like, I hadn't heard that. Sorry if I haven't been on Twitter enough today to kind of.
Oh no, it was.
Things like
they
that.
had him on. I think Kevin Bowen this morning, and he didn't really say it either. But I mean, I like it. You're not. I mean, and at the same time, like the last thing I'll say, and then I'll pass it to James with it is, I like to. It keeps everyone where they're at, right? Like you're not moving. I was a big fan of Scotty Montgomery, but you're not moving him. You're not moving Milanovic from the quarterbacks. You're keeping everyone where they're at, minding what they've been doing for the first, 8-9 games of the season already.
Exactly. And that was the point that Jeff Saturday made today. He was like, this move was basically the path of least resistance. And also this guy has been here in the building, I believe since like 2018. He's actually been here longer than anyone else on the staff, I believe, as far as some of these coaches. So he's a voice that's respected. And I think that, again, after you make a move like hiring Jeff Saturday, I think all bets are off. So you can't really, in my opinion, be, like me personally, critical of the Jeff Saturday thing and also be even more critical of the Parks. It's like at that point, things are going to be different. They're going to be unique. They're going to be unprecedented. So a lot of people are getting their shot. And I do think, if anything, for Parks, and this is just me as a person, you want your shot no matter how you get it. So if you get it, you got to think like, okay, was I ready for it? Are you ever ready? Are you ever ready for anything? Probably not. So you got to get it and try your best at it and see what happens. And I do think that this is something they can kind of rally around. My only thing is this. The NFL is weird, man. And that's why I picked them to finish 5-11-1. I think there's going to be 2 wins somewhere in these last 8 games. Don't ask me where specifically. Yeah. But I do think that, I say they come out Sunday, they get a turnover for the first time in forever, like early in the game. They get some points on the board and they're ahead. What does that do for your confidence? What does it do for your team? What does it do for your ability to go out there and continue to execute and things like that? So that's kind of where I'm at. Like, is he in over his head? Is Parks in over his head? Is Jeff in over his head? Probably. But at this point, you kind of have to just lean into the fact that you care about it. You want to be good at it. And you're just not going to know until you do it. So Jeff said it today. He was like, I could come out and I could be terrible. And they could tell me after these 8 games, like, thank you for your service and goodbye. But, I think that all of them really care and want to prove that they can do this one way or the other. It's just, how well can you do it? Because, I feel like they've tried so many different things this season. And obviously this is the biggest change, the biggest try, so to speak. And we'll see. I know that Irsay's come out and said it. I believe it's a pop crap. It's like, we're not tanking. That's BS. We're trying to win games. And I'm thinking to myself, like, big picture here. Like, if you come out with 3 games, that doesn't help you. If you win, if you win and you get into the playoffs, by all means, you always take a playoff chance in the NFL. But if you miss the playoffs and you finish 8-1 or something like that,
that's the worst case scenario.
Then what? So I just feel like there's going to be a lot of things we look back on from this moment and realize, okay, like, where did they go from here? So I'm very excited about that. And man, I'm just fascinated. Like, I'm not even upset or mad because I'm not a fan. Like, I don't have a bone to pick with anyone. I'm just fascinated by the decisions and the direction of this team because I believe if I asked either of you if you thought Jeff Saturday would be the head coach, in November in week 10, if you thought Matt Ryan wouldn't be the starting quarterback, if you thought Jonathan Taylor wouldn't be on pace for 1,000 yards, if you thought Shaquille Leonard wouldn't be back and playing like himself again by now, there's so many factors in this season that we haven't even just been able to digest. And I think when we look back on it, years from now, we'll be able to say this was the true effect of 2022 because the decisions being made now, make no mistake about it, will affect the future.
Yeah, there's no doubt about it. And I just, the fan in me always wants to win. I just don't like the tank mode. It stinks. And I just don't like that. But I'll say this, probably first time in my life I've ever felt like we either need to lose every single game or go on a serious run. Because like you mentioned, being in the middle of the pack, that's just going to be very, very hard to move up high enough to actually draft a quarterback. And then you're back into the situation. What do we do? How do we acquire someone who can help us win football games? When it comes to Park excuse me. When it comes to Park Frazier, there's nothing to know. And maybe he goes out there. I think the big thing is he just needs to be confident and just have fun. He knows the plays. What I worry about is situational football. James, when he's never been in those moments where it's like, we've got this play, this is our best 3rd and 4, with the game on the line type of situation, who to trust, what plays to call. You just never know. But then again, he could be this, young guy, like a lot of teams have hit big on that, in the NFL in recent years. I don't know. It's just a meh decision for me, if I'm being honest. I probably would have rather than went with like a Scotty Montgomery, just someone who had a little bit of a background in that. And but I do understand now, Jeff Saturday's point of saying, hey, we just want to keep things as tight as it possibly can. And we want to have, this is already a big enough disruption right here. We don't want to have multiple disruptions as it goes. Before we get off here, guys, James, just your thoughts and maybe just a couple expectations of the game against the Raiders.
I think that it's going to be high energy, a lot of focus, a lot of us against the world type of mentality. But I worry about the execution just because there's so many moving parts. Like, for example, Jeff Saturday was telling us today, this is the first time he met with the team. First time they had a walkthrough, first time they had a practice together. So, to hire a coach on Monday and then to coach a game that Sunday, you haven't even had a full week to be in the building to find out, where all the restrooms are, you know what I'm saying? And stuff like that. So I think there's going to be a struggle with execution for sure. But I do think this is an opportunity for them to get a win because the Raiders are struggling. And look, the Colts are not a good team right now. The Raiders aren't as well. So if we're going just like teams that are not going well or not playing well, you have a chance because they're a similar like level as far as struggling seasons. Now, the Raiders have been together longer, obviously. They have more continuity. They have more high-powered offense. I think it will come down to, can they just win the turnover battle and give themselves a chance to win? Like if Derek Carr comes out and throws, 2 interceptions or something like that, you might have a chance if you get a flip field or a short field and things like that. So I expect them to come out and have higher energy, to be focused, to be enthused, to be maybe even slighted because there's even – I was asking some of the players today, like Stephon Gilmore, Zaire Franklin, others, like, there are some people thinking like you guys should just tank. But the thing about tanking from a player perspective is like you don't care about the tank because tanking means they're going to draft someone or draft multiple someones who can come in and take your job potentially. So it's good for the fans in a sense because it's like, oh, we'll get the high pick but like the players in the locker room, none of them care about tanking because that means one of these guys in here is going to have a job. And so I think that they're going to be rallying around that aspect of like, no, we're not tanking. We're not waving that white flag. We want to win. So I think it'll be a struggle, but I don't think it's going to be like a complete like blowout. Like they don't deserve to be on the same field as the Raiders. Like I think that it could be sort of like most Colts games outside of, a couple of them where they're in it. And then it comes down to what you can do, in the last 8 minutes or so.
What do you think, Steve?
So I like what you said first about tanking because, one of the big things, too, is that no player wants to put bad tape out. You were talking about Stephon saying tape. They're not going to want to put tape. The players aren't tanking. by any stretch. Like they're not going to want. And Saturday's not there to tank because he wants to look good. So I mean, so I kind of said, this was going to be potentially the first game that I was not going to. I've picked the Colts, I think, every week. I've been proven wrong more than right. But I've lowered it down to where I don't pick high scoring games anymore. But I hate Josh McDaniels. Look. And if Saturday can be the nail in his coffin to get him fired from the Raiders, I would love it. I think you're right. I'm interested to. I am more interested to see what happens in this game than any other game this season besides Sam's versus Start to see like what was going to happen. The intrigue is there. I don't know what to expect. I have no clue. It's going to be a really interesting kind of fun thing to see what transpires from it. And I've kind of thought about this too more and more. And I was like, it would just be so much this season if they came out and like dropped 35 points. Yeah. And you're just like, oh my God.
Yeah.
Like, what just happened?
Nomad puts up Colts 61, Raiders 50.
I mean, I think the Colts have to score on like their first opening drive of the season. You know,
James, what would happen to your mentions if they went out and scored 35 points and like scored 21 in the first quarter?
Oh
like,
man,
what would happen for you? Like it would explode.
I have a bunch of people telling me like how dumb I am, how terrible I am in my job. I never believed in them, stuff like that. I'll say this too. Like I appreciate all the discourse. I think that's sometimes a misconception. I like to have fun on Twitter. So if you ever got like disagreements, I'm not going to take it personal. Like, just back it up with whatever you think is valid. But I will add that one of the more tangible reasons I think they have a chance is because of the defense. The defense is pretty much kept in most of the games. They just haven't been able to get that turnover. And I think that speaks to the offense as well, because when the opposing team is playing with a lead almost all the time, it's very, very hard to force that offense to do things they don't want to do. So they're not going to become, turnover prone. They're not going to throw it if they can't throw and things like that. So I think the defense gives them a chance, and it just comes down. So if you can patch up anything on the offense to give yourself a chance at some points, it doesn't have to be great. But again, like a scoring drive, here or there would be welcome. It's just, we've been saying that all year and it just hasn't happened. And again, if Saturday is a miracle worker, if he can flip this thing from literally Saturday to Sunday, pun intended, we'll see. But I think the defense gives them a chance. I don't count those guys out. They've been a really good unit this year. And I think that a turnover or something could be the reason they have a chance or increases their chances of pulling off an upset. And if they are, honestly, I would, pay to read a book about just this week. Honestly, like maybe not now, but like, when it simmers down or years from now, maybe I'll ask Kiefer I'll nudge him and say, all right, you did the luck podcast, you did the Saturday podcast as well, 8 weeks of Saturday or something like that. And we'll see how it goes, but defense will give them a chance. Like, I don't think that that's a doubt in my mind. Like they've played lights out pretty much all year. And I don't bet too much against Grover Stewart either. So
it's a big man. He's had a fantastic, probably the best player, most consistent player on our team this year. Yeah. 3 things I'm looking for. Can we just resemble, a good, not great, a good offensive line? And can they do something, anything to kind of get that going in the right direction? Secondly, just not turning the football over. And then third, just no penalties, no bad penalties. Penalties are a part of football. Can't control all of it, but no penalties. Just a more fundamentally sound football game. And I think if you get that out of this football game, well, I think that's probably a win for Jeff Saturday no matter what, because this year we've been very, very bad and just untimely fumbles and turnovers. When you're going in with 3 points with a chance to make it 6, and you're marching down the field and you just constantly let that ball turn over, you've done your defense no favors this year, really. Because they've been, James, this defense has been pretty solid. When it comes down to it, I want to give it just a quick chance for you just to kind of just talk about what you've been doing. Your journey's been pretty cool. I know you got the podcast. Let everybody know about that for the people who popped in here at the end as we get ready to sign off on the show.
Yeah, so you can check out our podcast, 1% Better, where me and Zach Kiefer broke down just a crazy week in Colts land. And then I have a piece coming out tomorrow with more reaction from the players about not necessarily Jeff Saturday, but just their respect and love of Frank Reich. I think that it's something that needs to be written, not in the sense of like, I'm not writing like, oh, he should have kept his job. It's just the reality and the relationships that maybe get lost in the Twitter notifications and the transactions. Like you kind of forget that these are humans and they really care about this. So talked to some guys about that. Got some really good insight from some guys around the locker room. And I'm sure some of you heard from them today. Like I said, Quentin Nelson was really candid about it. I think that he was really hurt by it because he feels like he let Frank Reich down. And one of the coolest things is like he still calls him Coach Frank. And I think all of us kind of like I still call my AAU coach my coach whenever I see him, and it's been 10 years, So
Yeah.
that's something to check out for tomorrow. We'll have other content as well. I got a column coming for Sunday morning. I won't tell you what it is. You have to just check it out. I think you all will enjoy it. It's outside of the box, which seems like a theme for this week. So I'll leave it at that. But
Cool.
yeah, check us out, theathletic.com. Got some great colleagues doing some great things. And thank you all for supporting what we do. Thank you for having me on. And like I tell you every time, man, I'm living a dream. It's crazy as it is. I haven't slept much this week because of the job. But we still get to go to games for free. I'm going to Vegas next week. I got no complaints as far as life goes. So yeah, life is good, man.
There it is, man. James Boyd on the live stream. He's been on here a couple times in the past on the pre-recorded.
I got my other brother on here, man. Finally.
Exactly, man. It all came through. Steven, like we always end our shows, man. We'll let you send us off and everything. And guys, thank you so much for hopping on tonight. We had a blast.
Yeah, I mean, it's been a crazy 24, 48, 72 hours. It's just there's nothing to really say. This was more of for us this time. It's just a chance to talk about kind of the craziness, but in the end, too, like we all love the Colts. James does a fantastic job covering them. We love James, and at the same time, I love you. Zach loves you. James loves you. We're out till next time. Go Colts. Please God, Saturday win on Sunday.
Exactly.